When you use a word processor to write an essay, the software stores the text, but your brain executes the structure and reasoning. When you prompt an artificial intelligence to write that same essay, the software organizes the logic for you. We have a long history of offloading mental tasks to technology. Psychologists call the baseline the Google effect. Because we expect facts to be easily accessible online, our brains adapt by remembering exactly where to find information, rather than memorizing the information itself. Generative AI breaks this historical pattern. It does not act as a static repository waiting for a human query to retrieve a fact. Instead of externalizing our hard drives, we are now externalizing our active processing. We are handing over the active synthesis. Because these systems think for us rather than simply storing data from us, we require a specific framework to understand how the human mind functions when its logic is produced elsewhere. Cognitive scientists describe this new state as entangled cognition. The processing of information no longer happens entirely inside the skull. It occurs across a distributed platform connecting the human mind, the physical body, and the algorithmic co-orchestrator. This creates a strict paradox. Entangled cognition boosts immediate performance and output, but it simultaneously threatens our internal metacognitive regulation, our ability to monitor and control our own thinking. To navigate this tension, we can map delegated thought across a hierarchy of psychological integration, observing exactly what happens to the brain at different levels of dependence. Defining the threshold where a tool stops aiding the mind and begins replacing it is a central hurdle for researchers and designers working with automated reasoning. Look at the base of this conceptual model of cognitive offloading. The first tier is assistive offloading. At this level, an external aid cues recall or reduces mental clutter, but the user retains full monitoring and regulation over how the tool is used. To test the efficacy of this baseline tier, an empirical study published in 2025 by Li Wei Su analyzed the performance of English as a foreign language tourism students. The researchers divided 96 students into two cohorts. A control group received traditional classroom instruction, while an experimental group used ChatGPT to receive highly personalized, immediate feedback on their language practice. The control group saw an average increase of 19.62 points. The treatment group spiked to nearly 38. By minimizing extraneous cognitive load, like identifying syntax errors, the AI freed up mental capacity for meaningful language production. The AI in this experiment provided scaffolding. It supported the students' metacognitive awareness without doing the final translation work for them. At the assistive tier, entangled cognition succeeds because the AI absorbs the low-level friction. The user maintains their internal locus of control, directing the output themselves. Moving up the diagram, we reach the second tier, substitutive offloading. This occurs when the external system provides ready-made solutions that circumvent the user's internal ideation entirely. When you rely on an algorithm to predict your text or auto-generate formatting, you reduce the time spent struggling with the material.
But you also bypass the internal neural pathways required to synthesize original thought. This introduces a psychological penalty known as the illusion of competence. In cognitive science, your ability to accurately estimate how well you understand a topic is known as your judgment of learning, or JOL. When an AI generates a polished, articulate response, users consistently miscalibrate their judgment of learning. They read the machine's fluent output and confuse the system's articulation for their own actual comprehension. This miscalibration collapses the internal feedback loops that signal confusion, identify logical holes, or prompt further study. Substitutive offloading trades durable, long-term learning for immediate speed. The user walks away with confidence in skills they have not actually mastered. This brings us to the top of the model, disruptive offloading. Here, chronic reliance on an automated system erodes self-monitoring and induces a state of cognitive passivity. If this level of delegation happens early or constantly, it triggers developmental displacement. It prevents the maturation of core executive functions, like impulse control and complex planning, because the brain never faces the resistance required to build them. To evaluate the ultimate cost of this displacement, we can look to the epistemic philosophy of J. Adam Carter.
Carter proposes a thought experiment involving a subject who elects to unshackle themselves with wearable devices. Anytime they want to know something, they simply think of the query, and computers instantly fulfill the informational request, requiring zero effort. They possess all the data they want, but they fail the standard of competent causation. In performance epistemology, a cognitive success only qualifies as a genuine human achievement if the positive outcome happened specifically because of the agent's abilities. Consider a ballerina executing a flawless leap. If we discover her movements were entirely guided by a series of invisible wires, the performance loses its value. We wanted to see an achievement of skill, not just a successful physical trajectory. Disruptive offloading guarantees a successful output, but it strips away the competent causation required to claim ownership over the result, fundamentally restricting the user's freedom to achieve on their own merits. Reviewing the complete taxonomy reveals a strict inverse relationship. As external automation increases from the bottom of the diagram to the top, the user's internal regulation and learning autonomy degrade. The threshold separating a helpful scaffold from a harmful displacement rests entirely on who handles the metacognitive heavy lifting. If the machine evaluates the logic, the human mind atrophies. To address this, software designers must implement a concept known as constructive friction. Instead of optimizing for pure speed, interfaces need intentional roadblocks. This could mean inserting mandatory confidence checks or deliberately delaying the output of an AI-generated text to force the user to formulate their own hypothesis first. These micro-interruptions force the user's internal cognitive loop to re-engage. They demand active reflection rather than passive consumption. We can maintain cognitive sustainability by engineering systems that prioritize